This is chapter 29, section 1 of the reading, and you've got two different pieces within this section. You have new directions in foreign policy and moralistic diplomacy in Mexico. And we have skipped a few sections from the last reading, and so just to kind of advance the story, where we last left off, we were talking about William Howard Taft and dollar diplomacy. We're now fast forwarding to 1912, and the president who was elected in 1912 was Woodrow Wilson. Quick background on the 1912 election, because it was interesting. You had Taft running to represent the Republican Party. You had also Theodore Roosevelt ran as a progressive. And if you remember, Theodore Roosevelt had handpicked Taft to succeed him, but he was not happy with the way that Taft was doing things in 1908. And so he ran in 1912 against him, ultimately split the Republican vote, which then handed the election to Taft. And so Taft takes office, and when he takes office, he is a very different president, as you might expect from both Taft and Roosevelt. And so Wilson hated imperialism and the implementation of dollar diplomacy. And so when he takes office, he makes changes to reverse those actions or that course. And so what he said was that the government was no longer going to offer special support to American investors in Latin America and China. So pulling back dollar diplomacy, we're not going to, it's not the government's job to protect the private interest of these businesses. He also repealed the Panama Tolls Act in 1912, which had given the United States the right to use the canal without paying tolls on it. And he did that because other countries weren't happy, specifically Britain was unhappy with this. And he also says that the Philippines are going to be free and independent, and in the meantime grants them territorial status, and says once that they are stable, they will be free and independent. That does happen, but it's not for another 30 years. So these are all examples of Wilson kind of rolling back the previous policies of those administrations. His Secretary of State, William Jennings Bryan, was also anti-imperialist and a pacifist, and he prevented greater conflict between California and Japan that was erupting during this time period. So he asked the California legislature to back off laws that wouldn't allow Japanese to own land in California. This pleased Tokyo. So again, trying to better relations with countries around the world, even if it maybe wasn't necessarily what the individuals within the United States would have wanted. However, what we'll see on the next slide is that Wilson is forced in some degree to continue some of the policies of big stick and dollar diplomacy. And so we see that with several instances listed there. And so in Haiti, there is a revolution that takes place among the Haitian people. And so the Haitian Revolution is from 1912 to 1915, and you have the overthrow of the Haitian president. You've got a new rebel group in charge. And so Wilson is forced to send in troops to protect U.S. lives and property in Haiti, but they end up staying 19 years. And so again, despite the fact that Wilson is anti-imperialist and promotes a different form of diplomacy, we see an example of him having to revert back to dollar diplomacy and even big stick with the stationing of troops there. In the Dominican Republic in 1916, there's a similar issue taking place. There's debt problems that have thrown the economy into chaos, and so U.S. Marines are sent there to maintain and get order, and they end up staying for 8 years. In the Virgin Islands, this is just outright dollar diplomacy, buying territory. And so the Virgin Islands are purchased from Denmark for $25 million in an effort to stop Germany from doing so. So again, we see some dollar diplomacy there, using money to exert our influence and add to the territory that we control. But also you see some Monroe Doctrine and Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, because we did not want Germany to be engaged in the Western Hemisphere. Again, I know I'm going a little bit quick, so hopefully you're taking these notes ahead of time, so if you need to pause to finish the slide, do so. The next slide is over the next section of reading, which was moralistic diplomacy in Mexico. And so this is kind of a case study of Wilson's foreign policies. It's him interacting with one specific nation over a long period of time, actually, over several years of his presidency. So in the video we're going to watch this week, it focuses on these events, and even more so, the video focuses from kind of the Mexican perspective to understand the idea of what's taking place in Mexico at this time. And this really is a good time to highlight, just as you guys get this slide written down, that this is History of the Americas. We've focused in large part on the United States, and we've poked around in Latin America a little bit. Mexico is going to be the focus of this section in the video this week, and so you'll get some of that. And eventually we will be covering Canada, specifically in regards to World War I. So branching out beyond the United States, although the United States is kind of the hub of the history of the Americas. So with all of that said, in Mexico at this time period, U.S. investments total over $1 billion, and this is $1 billion in 19 teens dollars, so we would be talking several billions in today's money. And in Mexico, you've got a revolution taking place. You have Porfirio Diaz is overthrown in 1913, and the person who takes over is Victoriano Huerta, is in power, and he's kind of this ruthless guy. Wilson does not like Huerta, and so actually starts supplying weapons to his enemies, to Huerta's enemies, Venustiano Carranza and Francisco, better known as Pancho Villa. And so Wilson is supporting those two candidates in hopes, or those two people in hopes that they can gain power from Huerta. William Randolph Hearst, who we talked about before with Yellow Journalism, the newspaper publisher, tries to get the Yellow Press going again. He wants the United States to intervene in Mexico because, and we'll see here, in I guess this next slide there shows it, he might have ulterior motives in that he does have a huge ranch in Mexico. Your textbook outlines that it is the size of the state of Rhode Island. So he wants the U.S. to intervene. Wilson says he wants to focus on human rights over property rights. And so we see the ideas of moral diplomacy, or Wilsonian diplomacy as it is also known, in play there. So the story in Mexico, and again, you'll get more details in the video, how it plays out. You have an event in Tampico, Mexico in April 1914, where you have U.S. soldiers who are arrested, and this angers the American public and the American press. So Mexico does release them and apologizes, but Wilson demands a 21-gun salute. So a little bit petty here, but Mexico is not willing to grant it. Also probably a little bit petty. And so in response, Wilson orders the U.S. Navy to take the Mexican port of Veracruz. This angers both Victoriano Huerta and Carranza, who don't like each other, but in this case, they don't like what the United States is doing. So it causes them to protest, and there could be conflict, war between the U.S. and Mexico. However, the ABC powers of Argentina, Brazil, and Chile intervene and mediate between the U.S. and Mexico. And so they don't end up fighting, but there is tension between the nations. And so then what this leads to is the United States sending in General John Blackjack Pershing into Mexico to pursue Pancho Villa, because he has killed 16 engineers in Mexico in Mexico, U.S. troops, engineers who are in Mexico, and then actually crosses over into the United States in Columbus, New Mexico, and kills 19 Americans. And so Pancho Villa is basically just trying to stir up chaos to try and then take control within Mexico. And so he thinks that the U.S. being involved in Mexico will assist with that chaos ensuing. And so they send Blackjack Pershing in to go find Pancho Villa, and we've talked about Pershing before. He does not have success finding actual via, but there are conflicts between U.S. and Mexican troops. But we eventually remove ourselves from the situation because at this point we're approaching 1917, and outbreak with World War I is taking more of our attention. So there's kind of the broad overview of events in Mexico. Again, the video that we will watch this week, or I guess at this point, if I'm showing this in class, you have seen part of the video outlines this and details this with much greater detail. And I think the video and just the content lends itself well if you are interested in the events taking place with the Mexican Revolution for an internal assessment topic. And I will continue to bring that up because it is something that you just need to have in the back of your head of identifying a potential topic for your paper. With all of that, that is it for this week's notes.